All right, it's Tuesday on the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com with you this morning. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. That's the deal. That's the website. That's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. Panther-Lair.com is the website you need to go and check out. And then, of course, right here on YouTube, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's what I ask you to do every day. I hope you're doing it. We still see the numbers that are a lot of you who are watching these videos are not subscribed, so try and help us close that gap. And then there's a lot of people who actually are subscribed but are not watching the videos. So I don't know what you guys are doing, but also help us close the gap on that one, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you only listen to this on the audio side, head over to the YouTube page, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Click the like button, the subscribe button. Click every button you can that is some sort of positive reinforcement for what we're doing here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We put out these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We release them every morning here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and appreciate everybody who tunes in to watch the videos or listen to the audio podcasts. It's always fun to sit down and chat, and it's going to be fun over the next few months as we head toward the season. Once you get into the season, we've got a lot of things to talk about. There's the last game to review, the next game to look ahead to, whatever topics might be arising. Same thing through the basketball season and even into spring camp in March and April. But at this point, we're sort of wide open, and it's just sort of general Pitt talk. And so yesterday we talked about the 5 most important players on offense. And then, of course, today we're flipping it over to the defensive side, the 5 most important players on defense. And this is just sort of my own thoughts on who Pitt is going to be relying on. It's partially who they're going to be relying on, but not entirely that, because the reality is they're going to be relying on, they have to play 11 players. Whether they're good or not, whether they produce or not, 11 guys have to be on the field. This is about the 5 guys who Pitt needs the biggest production out of, the biggest step forward, the biggest performance out of. 5 players who are at the top of the list for the defense, who need to be good this year to help the defense be good, and by extension, help the team be good. When we talked about the offense yesterday, I said Phil Dracovic is the obvious answer as the most important player on offense. So I took him out of the mix and talked about the other 5 guys that I'm, thinking are going to have the most on their plates this year, are going to be relied on the most. And we talked about that, and now flipping over to the defensive side. And this is a side, I think there's sort of mixed feelings about the defense right now. Well, I don't know if there is or not, but there should be mixed feelings about the defense, because on one hand, you've got, consecutive years, multiple years, dating back probably as far as 2017, of really consistent, strong defensive play. Consistently strong. Every now and then, not perfect. You still have some gaffes in there. The 2018 North Carolina game comes to mind as one where the defense really didn't live up to it, and really a week later at UCF was sort of the same thing. And even, over the 2019-20, 2019 their defense was pretty good. There wasn't a lot of gaps in there. In 2020, you have the Notre Dame game and the Clemson game was sort of extreme examples, but on the whole, the defense was really good. 2021, it was an ACC championship caliber defense and played like it. And then even last year, you'd be hard pressed to put any of the losses on the defense. Whether you look at the Tennessee game, and I would say this about all the games. Yes, the defense could have made a few more plays. I talked about this yesterday. The defense could have made a few more plays, could have played a perfect game and would have given the team a better chance to win. But I would say that they played largely well enough to win in the Tennessee game, certainly the Georgia Tech and Louisville game, and for most of the North Carolina game. They didn't play perfect against North Carolina, but for the most part and for most of the game, they played well enough to win. And so there's a certain amount of confidence that carries over with the defense from year to year because of how good they've been and for how long and how consistently. But at the same time, you've got that almost sort of offset, or at least a little bit, by the fact that they're replacing 6 starters, that they're replacing defensive ends, they're replacing the All-American defensive tackle, they're replacing the middle linebacker, they're replacing both safeties. That's a lot to replace, sort of straight up the gut of the defense. And you're taking out very key players, crucial players. I mean, Kalijah Cansey, Servassier Dennis, Brandon Hill, and Eric Hallett. These were significant players on the defense, key pieces to that defense and the success that they had last season. Not to mention the defensive ends, Haba Baldonado and Deslin Alexandra and John Morgan. They're all gone. And so you have a lot to replace. And so you've got these sort of competing feelings of, well, the defense is just, they just keep reloading. They just keep doing it. They just keep reloading year after year. When they lost Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver, what are they going to do? Well, they figured it out. When they lost Damar Hamlin and Paris Ford, what are they going to do? Well, they figured it out. And so you can sort of be buoyed a little bit by that confidence of they lost Kalijah Cansey and Servassier Dennis and Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett. What are they going to do? Well, they'll figure it out. But that's a lot. That's a lot to replace in 1 year. It's a lot of production, it's a lot of experience, and it's a lot of talent to replace in 1 year. But that's what they have to do. So there's sort of mixed feelings, I think, on the defense. And these are the 5 guys who I think will matter the most and have the most to do with that transition and making it feel like a reload rather than a rebuild. And the first one, and these aren't ranked in any particular order. I'm just kind of going front to back of the defense, more or less. I mean, jump around, to some different spots. But Dayon Hayes has to have a big season this year. He has to take a big step forward. He's the main guy that's going to step in at those defensive end positions. At one of them, he's going to be a starter. He's going to start every game, and he's going to be a key contributor who's relied on to create pressure off the edge and force the quarterback to hurry his decisions, make bad decisions, and ideally, either get a sack or force a bad throw. This is what it's been, since Juan Price in 2016, and they've been able to rely and count on those defensive ends, and they've gotten great production out of the defensive ends pretty much since then. Now it's Dayon Hayes' turn, and I think there's more hype for him than there's been for any defensive end since like Dwayne Hendricks, back in 2015 when he transferred in from Tennessee and never really ultimately lived up to it. But there was not this much hype for Rashad Weaver and Patrick Jones. There was not this much hype for Haba Baldonado and John Morgan and Deslin Alexandra. But there's hype for Dayon Hayes, and there's excitement and expectations for Dayon Hayes as a local guy, a 4-star prospect, a guy who stayed home, whose recruitment was a big win for Pitt. But he hasn't really produced at that level yet. Now he's a senior, which is crazy to me. He was a freshman in 2020, and he's a senior. And, without that level of production that you would have expected to see out of Dayon Hayes heading into his 4th year. There's different things. There were guys ahead of him. There were older players. He got suspended. There are a lot of different factors that go into it, but this is the year. It has to happen for Hayes now, and Pitt's defense needs it to happen for Hayes now. He's got the option to come back in 2024 as a super senior because he was on the roster in 2020. So this doesn't have to be this isn't necessarily his last year of college. It's not, by definition, the last year of his eligibility, but it is the year when he needs to take a big step, where he needs to be a breakout player, not just for Pitt, but in the ACC. He needs to come out of this season as one of the more productive and just overall one of the better defensive ends in the conference, which he has not been to this point in his career. It needs to happen this year. What he needs to do to take that step, there's probably a lot of things. Charlie Partridge could probably talk to you a lot longer than this Morning Pitt video will go about the things Dayon Hayes needs to do. I think there are probably things he needs to do on the field and off the field where he can be a more productive player and a more effective player. But he needs that consistency. And he's got a lot of physical tools. He's very good. He's shown his ability and what he can do, but he needs to do it consistently. He's had some flashes over the last few years. But Dayon Hayes needs to be the leader. He needs to lead this team in sacks, is what it ultimately come down to. Dayon Hayes needs to be the team leader in sacks, and it needs to be, if not double digits, close to it. I'm talking like 9.5. And ideally, it'd be more like 10.5 or 11. That's the kind of season Pitt needs from Dayon Hayes, because I don't know where the sack production is going to come from otherwise. I think you'll get sort of a standard amount of sacks out of the linebackers. The other defensive end, you probably can assume you're going to get 3.5 to 4.5 sacks, depending on who it is. And maybe maybe it's Nikai Johnson and he has a big breakout year. It's Bam Brema and he has a big breakout year, whatever it is. But you're not going to get that production up the middle. I don't think you're going to have another defensive tackle who produces more than 2.5 sacks is my guess from any individual defensive tackle. So you're not going to get that production in the backfield, which means somebody's going to have to step up and take that mantle. And I think it needs to be Dayon Hayes. It's his year. And he needs to be the guy. So that's one guy I think needs to have a big season. The next guy who I would say is one of the 5 most important players on defense is Shane Simon. We talk about replacing Servassier Dennis. Shane Simon is the guy who's going to be tasked with doing it. And that's no easy task to step in for Servassier Dennis. Servassier Dennis was at Pitt for 4 years, played really well. He was a starter over the last couple of those years and was he was a steadying force in the middle of the defense. The whole thing sort of operated out from him, and he was really in charge. He was a coach on the field, and he was really, really good at what he did. He was really good with his IQ, with knowing what to do in every situation. He knew what everybody else on the field needed to do, and he was able to execute. He was athletic, and he was a good player. And there's a lot that Pitt is losing with Servassier Dennis leaving. There's the leadership, there's the knowledge, the IQ, like we talked about. There's the playmaking ability, the athleticism. All of those things, I'm not sure they have someone who can step in and replace them all. Shane Simon is going to be the guy who's going to take over as the starting middle linebacker. I don't know how he's going to replace all of those attributes I just listed that Servassier Dennis brought to the defense. I don't know how he's going to do when it comes to replacing the leadership, which is a big, big part of it, or the knowledge, which is a big, big part of it. And certainly the playmaking ability and athleticism. From watching Shane Simon last year, he didn't look like he was the same level of playmaker, the same level of athlete as Servassier Dennis, but he's going to have to do something. He's going to have to step it up. It's interesting to me that Shane Simon came off the field on the third down package last season, that Delta defensive package. They would bring in Solomon DeShields, and Shane Simon would come off. I'm curious to see if they do that again this year, or if Simon has a role on third down defenses, third and medium, third and long, that they like to use that defensive sub package. I think that spoke a little bit to his ability in coverage, that they didn't leave him out on the field. That position doesn't always drop into coverage, often blitzes. But I do think there is an element of coverage responsibility in that third down package, and Shane Simon's going to have to show that he can do it. And he's going to have to show that he can do it on first and second down too. There's a lot riding on Shane Simon being good, because he's stepping into an important position that was filled by a very good player a year ago. The next guy I would point to is MJ Devonshire, and I think everybody feels probably pretty good about Pitt's corners this year. Marquez Williams and AJ Woods and MJ Devonshire. And I would guess Devonshire and Williams will be the starters, but all three will play just like they did last year. They'll play a lot. And maybe even a younger guy like a Rylan Gandy or whoever steps in and gets more snaps, or Rashad Battle could step in as a fourth corner, and you could have even more of a 4-man rotation than they had a year ago. But I think Devonshire to me is really the guy at the top of the list. And this is no disrespect to Marquez Williams. I think Marquez Williams has been really good. I think Marquez Williams has done, it's evidenced by the target numbers where he doesn't get targeted all that often. And I think it's a show of respect from ACC quarterbacks that he doesn't get targeted more than he does. But I really think Devonshire is the guy who can rise as the cream of the crop here. And truth be told, you could pick any of these guys. You could pick Williams, you could pick Devonshire, you could pick Woods. The fact that they have 3, ACC level corners, and probably more than that, who can play is of high value. And sort of like yesterday when we talked about Ryan Baer being one of the most important players on offense because of the versatility he provides and what it allows Dave Borbley and the offensive coaches to do with the offensive line, to move guys around and have depth in the event of needing an injury. Not that Baer would, or in the event of needing someone to replace for an injury, and not that Baer would be the depth, but he allows his versatility and his ability gives them a lot of options on who does provide the depth. It's sort of like that with the cornerback position, where they've got 3 really good corners who could start at probably most schools in the ACC with Williams, Woods, and Devonshire. I picked Devonshire because I think he's got a chance to be one of the better players on the team overall, regardless of position. I think he's got a chance to impact the game in a lot of ways, like he did last season on the kick return and on defense, or punt return and defense. I would probably give him a chance on kick return. And I think he's a guy who could end up having a pretty explosive impact on games this year, like he did last year. Would he score 4 touchdowns, three different types of touchdowns, or whatever it was, punt return, a couple pick sixes, or whatever. I mean, he made some explosive impacts on games last season, and I expect him to do the same here. I mean, interception returns for touchdown are a matter of opportunity. You're not always going to get those opportunities, but he's shown that he can capitalize when that opportunity is presented to him. And I think he'll be even better this year and play himself into a potential NFL draft pick. He'll have the athleticism and the speed. He's going to have to show that he can, how well he can move sort of laterally, how he runs with receivers, his eyes, how he tracks the ball. All those other cornerback skills you can't necessarily measure, with a stopwatch. Javon McIntyre is another guy that I'm putting on my list of the most important players on Pitt's defense, and it's for a few reasons. One, he's going to be a starter, and he's due to take a big step forward as a first-time, full-time starter. And so that's a big part of it, but it's also his versatility. Again, we're going to come back to the versatility piece where McIntyre learned both safety positions this spring, boundary and field. I think there are other guys who are maybe just one or just the other, but McIntyre learned both, and that's going to give them, again, it's going to give the coaches the flexibility to move the safeties around, to find their best pair of safeties and play them both, because a guy like McIntyre, who I think will be one of the best two no matter what, it's really a question of finding who's going to play next to Javon McIntyre. And if it's P.J. O'Brien, who's more of a field safety, then Javon can play the boundary. If it's Steph Hall, who maybe plays a little more boundary, or Donovan McMillan, who's definitely more of a boundary safety, then Javon McIntyre can play the field side. McIntyre's versatility makes him one of the most important players because, again, it gives the coaches options on getting their best players on the field. In addition to that, McIntyre's shown himself to be a playmaker. He had a big play in the Miami game. He had a big play in the Sun Bowl. He's really good on the field. And now the coaches will tell you that he made a lot of mistakes last year, and he had good play in the Sun Bowl, but 5 mistakes that could have given up touchdowns and all this kind of stuff. So he's obviously got a little ways to go, and he needs to become more reliable and consistent on the field. But I think that'll come with more practice time over the summer, and then once he gets into the games, I think that'll help as well. But I think he's going to be one of those top 2 safeties, and his versatility allows the coaches to have lots of options on who they use for the other spot. And if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Those safeties are going to be under a lot of scrutiny. They're going to be under the microscope, particularly early in the season, because chances are they're going to make some mistakes. And unfortunately, at that position, which is probably the most unforgiving position on the defense, when you make mistakes, it's usually going for 6. So those safeties have a lot riding on their plate, and Javon McIntyre is going to have to, adapt pretty quick to the role that he's going to be playing, whether it's at field safety or boundary safety. And then the last guy, this is my guy. You're probably sick of hearing me hype him up, but Bengali Kamara, and I'm picking not because of position, not because of depth or versatility or any of these other things I've talked about with other players, either yesterday with the offense or today with the defense. I'm just picking him because I think he's going to be a stud this year, and I think he's going to have a monster season. I think he's going to stuff the stat sheet. I think he's going to play like an NFL prospect. I think he's going to be all over the field. I think he's going to have. I think he's going to have a mark in almost every stat category on the traditional defensive box score. He's going to have tackles for loss, sacks, interceptions, fumbles, pass deflections, quarterback hurries. He might have a safety or a block kick. I wouldn't be surprised by those. And there he is on the screen. I mean, he's built like an NFL linebacker. I think he moves like an NFL linebacker. And I think this year he's going to play like an NFL linebacker and be a real force over his half of the field, because he's playing that field linebacker position, that star linebacker, where he's got the wide side of the field. He's got a lot of ground to cover, and he's got a lot of territory to keep an eye on. And I think he's going to be up to that task, in addition to blitzing, getting into the backfield, hitting the quarterback, probably a strip sack or 2. I think he's going to be one of the better linebackers in the conference. I think he's going to be an all-ACC performer. And I just think he's going to be a stud this year. And so I'm picking him just because I think he's going to be one of the best overall players on defense. I think him and MJ Devonshire will be 2 of the best players on this team, and certainly 2 of the best players on the defense. So, there's no clever, listen to me for 90 seconds, rationalize this one. I just think he's going to be really, really good. And I think he's going to be one of those bright spots of the defense, particularly as it sort of rounds into form by midseason. I think he's going to be leading the way and making a lot of plays and really being I think he's going to be an explosive player and an exciting player to watch on the field this season. So those are my 5 most important players on defense: Dayon Hayes, Shane Simon, MJ Devonshire, Javon McIntyre, and Bengali Kamara. Leave in the comments or on the message board at Panther-Lair.com who you think I missed, who you think is more important, or if you think I'm just completely off base about any of these guys. I'd love to hear from you. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and of course the website Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you had a great Monday yesterday. Make sure you check out the website Panther-Lair.com, and while you're here, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Appreciate everybody who tuned in this morning on the video or on the audio side. I hope you have a great Tuesday. We'll talk to you again tomorrow on the Morning Pit right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com.